Eruvin 66a. You acted well when you rented. The sages of Nahardia wondered at this teaching. Did Rabbi Yohanan actually say this? Didn't Rabbi Yohanan say just the opposite? Renting from a Gentile is like establishing an Eruv. What is he not to be understood as imposing a stringency? Just as one who establishes an Eruv may do so only while it is still day, so too, one who rents a Gentile's property must do so while it is still day. The Gemara rejects this argument. No, his statement was intended as a leniency, just as one who establishes an Eruv may do so even with less than the value of a peruta. So too, one who rents a Gentile's property may rent it for less than the value of a peruta. And just as the one who establishes an Eruv need not be the owner himself, but even his hired laborer or harvester may do so, so too, one who rents a Gentile's property need not rent from the landlord himself, but may rent even from his hired laborer or harvester who are acting on his behalf. And similarly, just as with regard to one who establishes an Eruv, the halakha is that if 5 people live in the same courtyard, one of them may establish an Eruv with the residents of a different courtyard on behalf of them all. So too, with regard to one who rents a Gentile's property, if 5 people live in the same courtyard together with a Gentile, one of them may rent the Gentile's property on behalf of them all. Rabbi Eliezer wondered at Rabbi Yohanan's ruling that the sages had acted well when they rented the Gentile's property on Shabbat, and then they renounced their rights to that one, so that at least it would be permitted to use the courtyard. Rabbi Zierah said, what was the reason for Rabbi Eliezer's wonder? Rav Sheshet said, can it be that such a great person as Rabbi Zierah did not know what was the source of Rabbi Eliezer's wonder? He had difficulty with the statement of his teacher, Shmuel. As Shmuel said, with regard to any place where the residents render it prohibited for each other to carry, but where they may establish a joint Eruv if they so desire. In order to permit carrying, each may renounce his property rights for the other if they fail to establish an Eruv before Shabbat. However, in a place where the residents may establish an Eruv together, but they do not render it prohibited for each other for carrying, or where they render it prohibited for each other for carrying, but they may not establish an Eruv together. In such situations, they may not renounce their property rights for each other. The Gemara clarifies the above teaching. With regard to any place where the residents render it prohibited for each other to carry, but where they may establish an Eruv, they may renounce their rights for each other, such as in the case of 2 courtyards, one within the other. The residents of the 2 courtyards render each other prohibited to carry between the courtyards, but they may establish a joint Eruv in order to permit carrying. In such a case, the residents may renounce their property rights for each other if they fail to establish an Eruv before Shabbat. In a place where the residents may establish an Eruv together, but they do not render each other prohibited to carry, they may not renounce their property rights for each other. In a case where 2 courtyards, both opening to an alleyway that have a single opening between them, even though the 2 courtyards may establish a joint Eruv and be considered a single courtyard, they do not render it prohibited for each other to carry if they did not do so, because neither needs to make use of the other. Consequently, there is no option of renouncing rights in favor of the other courtyard. In a place where they render each other prohibited from carrying, but they may not establish an eruv together, what does this come to include? In reference to which case did Shmuel make this statement? Wasn't it meant to include a Gentile who shares a courtyard with two Jews? The Jewish residents of the courtyard render each other prohibited from carrying in such a case, but they may not establish an eruv due to the presence of the Gentile. The Gemara further analyzes the case. Now, if it is referring to a situation where the Gentile arrived on the previous day, i.e. before Shabbat, let him rent the property from the Gentile on the previous day. Before Shabbat, both options were available. They could have either established an eruv, or one Jew could have renounced his rights in favor of the other. Therefore, it would not have been considered a situation in which they render each other prohibited to carry, but cannot establish an eruv.